So for today, we're going to be doing something special. We're going to be pitching our own Halloween sequel, reboot. We kind of gave ourselves the freedom to do with as we please. But the setup is the production company has come to you and said, I want you to create the next great Halloween movie. You have the freedom to decide where that sits in the actual chronology, but if we were to create a Halloween movie, given what we know today, what would we do? And so to start, I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to you.
Right. Sounds good. So, going with that premise, the studio has approached me. I have written this outline. Let's say it turned into a full script. I'm not sure if you selected a director, but
I
I
did.
did. Okay, good. Glad we're on the same page there. So, I'm going with Adam Wingard, who
Makes sense.
I just think he has a history of making great slashers like he did with Your Next. He also knows how to handle big IP because he directed Godzilla versus Kong. And so he's got that sort of big blockbustery, mainstream big IP appeal. I'm a big fan of his Blair Witch 2016 remake. I know that might be a hot take, but that's another big horror IP that he managed, in my opinion, to pull off successfully. So I think that he's a great man for this job. I'm sort of envisioning a very just basic, not necessarily low budget, but very mid budget Halloween film. We're not going like crazy high budgets in like the 100 million range, more in like the 30 to $50 million range, which is a range I also think Adam Wingard excels in when it comes to his horror movies. So yeah, Adam Wingard will be directing this. It is a complete reboot, total reboot of the continuity, not in line with anything so far. And it is not called Halloween. It is called Hallows Eve, and not all Hallows Eve, but like where Terrifier came from, but just Hallows Eve, and you'll see why in just a second. So, okay. So, my story opens up. I want you to really put yourself into this story right here. It's a dark and stormy night, quite literally, thundering, rain pouring down. We're at Smith's Grove Sanatorium in Springfield, Illinois. We see it looks sort of like in a old Universal movie like Dracula's castle on the top of a hill. You just see this big impending prison fortress um, being illuminated by the lightning and being completely coated in rain as thunder rumbles, and you see a caravan of police cars and a van approaching the gate. They go through the gate and they come to the main patient entrance, and you see at the security desk at the front there's a security guard. He's kind of bored. It's like, it's a rainy night, not much is going on. He's trying to complete a crossword puzzle and he's stuck on a clue. And I figured that this would be a nice place to put a little Easter egg, like maybe the clue he's stuck on is like carpenter or something, just like a little like Easter egg throw to the audience.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden the doors open and he stands at attention, ready to do his job as this cop caravan pulls up and all these guards assemble this team to begin unloading this new criminal mental patient. So, after a brief sequence of these guards getting in armor, riot gear, grabbing weapons like batons and tasers, basically what I wanted to call back to was think the opening scene of Jurassic Park, where they're all getting ready with their weapons. They're stoic. They're ready for anything. They know that this is dangerous, and they're just prepared for the worst, and they're dealing with something incredibly dangerous. And all of this comes for a patient revealed to be a 6-year-old child, Michael Myers, described as blonde hair, blue eyed, but of course, we're never going to show his full face. And he's clutching a teddy bear. So the guards that are at Smith's Grove kind of laugh him off, and they're like, what are these guys doing? What are they scared of this little 6-year-old? I feel like I could just like push him over. Um, and they knew that some sort of dangerous criminal was coming. They heard on the radio that a very dangerous patient was incoming, and they're just completely underwhelmed. They immediately don't take any of it seriously, and they're just prepared to dismiss it all. And they're like, okay, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. And through some of the exposition, we get some of the traditional Halloween lore. We know that Michael is in for killing his teenage sister on Halloween night. He's completely mute, and the courts have declared him a total psychopath, and so he cannot go to a conventional prison, and thus has been sentenced to Smith's Grove Criminal Sanatorium. So after they complete the transfer, one of the officers pulls one of the guards aside and warns him about Michael, which again, the guard just kind of laughs off. Meanwhile, another that is in the transfer hall that's waiting to be booked starts to taunt Michael. And Michael, basically, we see him subtly steal a pen from one of the guards when the guard's not looking. And the guard is laughing off the cop that's telling him to be careful with him, yada yada. And in sort of the background, not in the foreground, but in the background, you start to see little Michael sort of start to get away from the two of them. And then all of a sudden, you hear a bunch of blood curdling screaming and yelling for help, and both groups respond, the group of guards at Smith's Grove and then the group of cops, and they find Michael standing over the dead patient, blood everywhere, bloody pen in hand, and he is tackled and handcuffed as the blood begins to spill and move on the floor. And then we get a big title sequence for Hallows Eve, and we get big text on the screen that says 15 years later. So now, 15 years later, it's October 30th, the day before Halloween. And now we get to our main story that follows a group of orderlies at Smith's Grove. There's 3 orderlies we're going to focus on: Samuels, Woody, and Monty. They're all 3 preparing for the night shift leading into Halloween Day. So it's a pretty normal, conventional night. Our main character is Samuels. He's a little bit more bookish by the rules. He takes his job a lot more seriously, whereas Woody and Monty, while they're his friends, they're kind of just there for the pay. They like to get into all sorts of mischief and goof off, and they like to, quote unquote, have fun with the patients. And there's also a noticeable age difference between them and Samuels. Samuels is a little bit older, on the older side, so he's more mature. Woody and Monty are a lot more on the younger side, so they're very immature. So Samuels begins to complete his rounds to get ready for the night shift, including going around to the various patients, which I'm sure there would be like more standout characters. I didn't think of any while I was making this pitch specifically, but just sort of like you get to see a whole cavalcade of wacky, criminally insane characters in there until finally he gets to the cell of Michael Myers, and he leaves with putting a meal in the slot. And Michael is the only one that doesn't speak and doesn't approach the door when he approaches. He just sits on his cot, his face obscured by the shadows in the back corner. So then Samuels returns to the orderly, I guess, I don't know, office room, wherever orderlies hang out. He returns, and as he walks through the door, Monty scares him with a mask. And it is the iconic Michael Myers, what we know as the Michael Myers mask. And he explains, and when Samuels tells him to cut it out and where he got that from, blah, blah, blah. He's not supposed to sneak in contraband from the outside. Monty says, oh, stop worrying. It's not that scary. It's just a Captain Kirk mask that I dyed white, trying to tie into the classic, anecdotal Halloween behind the scenes. And then after, they have their little hijinks, he puts it on the table, sort of like, I guess I envisioned this more like a break room sort of deal. So they're like, oh, stop with the jokes. Time to get back to work. And Monty's like, okay, okay, boss, yes, sir, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And he leaves the mask on the break room table. So later that night, another massive storm brews, just like 15 years prior. And it begins just getting worse and worse. Thunder and lightning starts to shake the windows and the walls. And outside, we see the storm raging, and eventually a bolt of lightning strikes a tree, which falls on a power line and cuts off power to Smith's Grove. The red lights flash, the emergency power kicks in after about 60 seconds of no power. And in that time it took for the emergency power to come on, there was a short circuit in the security systems, and now all the cells are open and the prisoners are released. So we see all the prisoners, all the ones we saw before, the individual iconic characters um, of these different crazy lunatics. We see them all, sort of filing out of their cells, not sure quite what to do. They're all very mentally unwell, so they're not quite sure what's going on, and they start fanning out into the halls, and then they start causing chaos and all sorts of trouble. Amidst all of this trouble and chaos, we go to the cell of Michael Myers, where he's just sitting calmly, surrounded in the shadows, just as he was before when we last saw him, as the chaos outside ensues. Until finally, he gets up and walks out of his cell, and the other inmates cower in fear and run just from his presence. So, now in the control room, with like all the camera, basically like sort of the guard post with all the cameras. Samuels, Woody, and Monty gather with the night security guards and prepare the Smiths Grove emergency plan to get them all back into their cells. They attempt to call for backup, but local 911 or to local 911, but there's no service as the storm rages and the phone lines are down. So Samuels and company agree that they're going to reprimand the inmates and put them back in their cells and wait for backup in the morning. So they decide to go into the guard room and get into riot gear and grab weapons and go out to begin reprimanding and tying up these loose inmates. However, while this is happening, we follow Michael as he makes his way through inmates looking for an exit. And as he does, he finally comes across the break room and he sees the mask that Monty left behind and puts it on and grabs a butcher knife from the break room kitchen drawer. So then Michael makes his way towards an exit, but there's a gang of inmates that blocks it. And they're from a different sort of wing of Smith's Grove. So they don't really know who Michael is, so they don't really know to fear him. But you can tell by their posture, they just know there's something different. Like, even though they don't know him, they just feel his presence and it sends a shiver down their spine, and they know that they should be scared. So they attempt to threaten him, and threaten to beat him up and take his mask and whatnot. But Michael does what Michael does, and he completely just eviscerates them with the knife, just like no effort. Just even though there's like 5 or 6 of them and they're big tough guys, he just completely wipes them all out into a bloodbath with this knife. So then Samuels, Woody, and Monty and a select few guards, they continue apprehending some of the inmates, and finally they come across the massacre that Michael had just left behind moments prior. And Samuels says that this has to be Michael Myers. And he starts to monologue that Michael is the only one that they really need to be concerned about, that he is more evil, more dangerous, and more sinister than every single other inmate that's on the loose combined. The other guys kind of laugh him off. Samuel sort of reminds them that, he's the seasoned one here. He's the one with the experience, and he knows Michael, and that he's, classic Loomis monologue about pure evil. And they just don't believe him. So he relays a story of when he first met Michael when he was a young orderly that night 15 years prior, when Michael killed the man with a pen. And he said that when they apprehended him he was watching from afar, and we sort of see this in a flashback where the camera is kind of different angle. So we see that a young Samuels, was there kind of all along, but we didn't see him in the beginning. He looks into Michael's eyes, and he expected, like a typical mental patient, that he'd be like grinning, or he'd have like his pupils would be huge. He would just like, just look like so aroused and ecstatic about what he had just done. But he said he looked in his eyes and it was just cold nothingness, such indifference. So he tries to convince them that they need to team up to find Michael because he's the real threat. But they just don't believe him, so they go their own way. So Samuels is committed to going after Michael alone as his sort of white whale, as Captain Ahab, and starts to follow his trail of carnage before Michael can escape. So, as Michael makes his way, basically just chopping through inmates, he comes across the other set of guards, Woody, Monty, and the other guards. And, they basically, like I said, they just didn't take Samuel seriously. So they're like, okay, well, there's like 5 of us and, 1 of him. Well, we know how that goes. And a big splatterfest occurs as Michael borderline superhumanly just takes them all out. And then Samuels, now tracking Michael, comes across the bloodshed of Woody, Monty, and the guards in disgust, and decides that it's time for him to finish this once and for all. So Samuels has an idea. He's going to try to appeal to Michael's humanity that he just has to believe that Michael has. So he goes back to Michael's cell and he grabs the teddy bear that he carried in when he was 6 years old, 15 years prior. So he thinks that he can appeal to Michael's humanity through the teddy bear in his childlike brain. So he does that, but he also stops by the guard's armory and stocks up on a shotgun and loads it with shells. So finally, Samuels finds Michael, who's just steps away from the Smith's Grove exit. It's now or never. He's the only line of defense from Michael in the outside world. He points the shotgun at Michael, threatens him to go back to his cell, but Michael remains silent, undeterred. So finally, Samuels unleashes several shotgun shells into his body, and Michael falls to the ground. Samuel walks over and kicks the knife away, takes it off the ground. He starts maniacally laughing and sobbing, but as he does this, we see Michael rise in the background, and Samuels turns in horror. As Michaels approaches Samuels, he presses him against the door. Samuels makes one final appeal with the teddy bear, which Michael accepts. He takes the teddy bear, he looks at it, and he ponders it. And for a second, Samuels just thinks, he finally did it. There is some humanity in there, and he proved it. But then Michael rips the head off the teddy bear and takes out a stainless steel butcher knife that was in there the whole time, that he took in when he was 6 years old, just for a moment like this. He reveals it. His whole time in Smith's Grove has been leading to this moment, and he proves once and for all that he has no emotional connections to this world. As Samuel screams about how Michael is pure evil, Michael slits his throat, opens the door, and escapes in the post-storm dawn on Halloween morning and walks down the road with a sign saying Haddonfield, 178 miles. And then, in a post-credit scene, we see Michael. We see Michael walking down the highway as a mechanic's truck stops beside him and pulls over and asks if he needs help. And Michael looks at him. We follow his gaze with the camera and see the mechanic wearing the iconic mechanic suit. And he starts to look very unnerved and unsettled at Michael's gaze of pure evil. And then it cuts to black. Hallows Eve, directed by Adam Wingard.
I don't know if the claps are going to resonate through my mic, but that was very good. I would pay to watch that. You
No,
know, I don't go to opening weekends. I always wait till or I don't go to opening night. I always wait till the matinee. But that's opening night worthy.
thank you, thank you.
um,
Um,
I really enjoy the fact that you. So one of the obviously the original 1978 movie, a lot of people will say it is the greatest slasher movie ever. Some people say it's the greatest horror movie ever made. The one time that I see people kind of talk negatively on it is the breakout at the beginning. And I think it was done on purpose to add to the intrigue that they didn't show anything. But a lot of people wish that they could have seen, what like more inside of Swiss Grove. So I love that you did that. You may know from our past conversations that I absolutely love Halloween 2. I love him sneaking around the hospital and murdering everybody. And though this is definitely on a grander scale, I love when the slashing takes place inside of a building, inside of dark corridors. It sounds like, especially knowing Adam Wingard, he could be able to, really utilize his camera to make these kills look really cool. So yeah, no, this was a great setup. I love the setting. I enjoyed the characters and the general flow. Everything was great. The post credit scene, him looking over and seeing the mechanic was a nice touch as well.
yeah, no, I really just like wanted it to be. I don't know. I feel like Michael Myers excels in like a bottle story sort of format. Um, I think that's what's so compelling about the original, just like how it's like in really not even just the original, just in most of them. I like the aspect of how he's just contained to this sort of one town, Haddonfield. So I tried to just make that like do that, but a little bit tighter, a little bit more claustrophobic. Um, and yeah, and just sort of capitalize uh on the idea that's present throughout the whole franchise that makes Michael Myers such a compelling character, that he really is just pure evil and he needs to be stopped at all costs. And that's what definitely, like, of course, like in a fuller script or production, Samuels would be fleshed out a lot more, but sort of that whole taking over the role as like a Loomis figure of, um, being like the Ahab to Michael Myers' white whale, where it's like he almost takes it upon himself to want to keep Michael from the outside world. And it's sort of like it's like a cliche. And I always think of like Rorschach and Watchmen, but the whole like, you know, basically he's in there not for his own protection, it's for everyone else's protection.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that those are all very good points. It's funny because as this story went on, as I got truly engulfed in what you were saying, all I could think of was I shouldn't have had you go first because mine is probably going to be terrible compared to what you just read.
no, I doubt it. I'm excited to hear it.
Mine is
Um,
almost the exact opposite of what you did.
that's
The
good.
but
That's
no,
that's what makes it interesting.
yes, and but I definitely, I really, no, I cannot. I'm gonna make another reference that people are gonna hate, but I personally, especially growing up, really liked Halloween Resurrection. Once again, it's just him in that house the entire time. Like you said, he excels at the bottle story, and it's just, I think that's one of the things that kind of puts like 1, 2, 7, 8 over the top for me. A lot of the other ones, he kind of gets too big as far as the story is concerned. So I think you really hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. Yeah. So it kind of, I guess I said it's a total reboot. I guess it could line up. I left it open enough that it could line up. I guess like some of the particulars wouldn't exactly line up, but in general, it sort of lends itself to like if there was a sequel, it could adapt the traditional Halloween story. Like it kind of has that natural flow.
Yeah,
But I kind of just envisioned just like a totally new continuity, like totally just fresh take and everything.
I agree. I think that if it for some reason bombed at the box office, people could just say, "Oh, well, this was, a prequel to the first one, so we're good." But then if it did really well, and of course the studio would throw more money at you and Wingard, then you could make a fully fleshed out new canon, and I think that would work very well.
For sure. And the last thing I'll say is just like it would be a different look just because obviously he doesn't have his mechanic outfit yet. So I feel like the design of the inmates would have to have like some more like thought and input into making them look a little bit more creative than just like, white asylum clothes, you know.
So,
But
uh, I know you have not done this before, but I know a couple of the people who listen to this will get what I'm about to say. So there's a game called Dead by Daylight, and in it you can play as Michael Myers, and his base costume is his mechanic's outfit, but there's an alternate costume where he's wearing his white asylum attire, and so the entire time I kept picturing him in that, and it's like this tattered gown, and he's barefoot, just kind of walking around all menacingly. So that's exact. If anybody listening wants like an image, that's exactly what I was picturing.
yeah. Or I guess, to an extent, part of this was inspired by, I think Rob Zombie kind of touched on that in his remake,
Hmm.
when he's in the hospital and he's in like the robe and the slippers, basically, and he escapes that way. So that also was like a big sort of inspiration. Sort of like taking that one scene that I really like and enjoy out of Rob Zombie's remake for adding the extra angle of making it almost like a prequel, answering those questions, but like just taking that one scene and just like expanding it. So
So that's actually, since you brought that up, I'm gonna take 5 minutes to have this discussion with you. So we don't have to touch the sequel, but Rob Zombie reboot 2007. To me personally, I love the first like 30, 40 minutes when he does the prequel stuff. I know a lot of people will complain that the back half of the movie is just a retelling of 1978, and we didn't need a prequel. Michael's pure evil. Why try to humanize him? All that jazz. I personally really enjoy the first act of that movie. I'm curious where you lie.
yeah, I'm definitely very positive on it. I It's one of these weird relationships that I have with this movie where I really respect Rob Zombie's vision there, and I really respect his creativity and his creative liberties for it. Because one of his whole like central points in that movie is that sort of monsters aren't born, they're made. So
Hmm.
it's like that development of how Michael became who he was, and it was because of the conditions in which he was, born and raised. Um, which is a very interesting angle, and I think it's explored very well. Um, at the end of the day, though, I don't really think that's how I like my Michael Myers,
That's
as
fair.
ex- as ex- as explained and made, not born. Because I really dig the idea of him just being just pure evil from the beginning and just the embodiment of evil. Um, but like I said, it's sort of a complicated relationship, but overall I'm generally very positive on it. But yeah, I think it works well for within its own sort of thing. I think Rob Zombie did a great job capitalizing on the story he wanted to tell and the ideas he wanted to explore, but it's just not how I sort of prefer my Michael Myers.
That's completely fair. That's the yeah. That goes along with the. I like the way you put that. In the vacuum of that movie, it works really well. But then also we can understand when people are like, "Well, I like it better if he's just the embodiment of evil. He just does it to do it. He doesn't have to have a reason." Um, yeah, no, okay. I can definitely get behind that. Um, did you have anything else you wanted to add before I give you my pitch?
Nope, but I am ready to hear what you got.
Okay. So my pitch is structured a little differently than yours. I didn't necessarily go scene by scene, but I did major plot points, and then I also have fill-ins as far as lore and stuff that needs to be explained, so that way you get the overarching story. So mine is a Halloween Legacy sequel. It is titled Myers, and it is directed by Scott Stewart. Scott Stewart directed Priest and Legion, which are two movies that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I know he can do horror because he has directed in a bunch of those anthology films that we love so much, most notably that Holidays one where each short film takes place with a different holiday. But specifically, I picked him because of his vision in both Priest and Legion. I think that he kind of like what you said with Adam Wingard, where he can not only do really well at telling a very small story that might be more bottled up, but also he clearly has the vision to go grander and do more and handle a larger budget. So Scott Stewart's my director. And when I say legacy sequel, this takes place directly after the first movie, 1978. I shouldn't say directly because there's a time gap. I wrote this. Also, I realized that I cut you off. Were you about to say something?
No, I just said sounds good. When
Okay.
you said Scott Stewart, I was like, that sounds like a good idea. I like Legion.
Okay. So I wrote this as a what I wish would have been done with the newest trilogy that we got. So I kind of like had in my mind where I really wanted them to go, and then they didn't do it. And they kind of teetered with some of the ideas, but they never went full into it, and so I wanted to. So some of this may seem similar to the trilogy that we got. Some of this is very different. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there. It is, 40 plus years in the future, takes place way after 78, is connected to 78, and it is a legacy sequel. So, starting off at the beginning, things that need to be known. At the end of 1978, when Myers falls off the roof of the house and he escapes, he does just go missing. He's never captured. He's never put in Smith's Grove. He is just, it's presumed that he was shot and he crawled off somewhere and died, and they never found the body. So that's like a key thing to note. The so We are now in Haddonfield, 40 plus years later. If you want it to be cool, you can make it 2018, but I just put 40 plus. And now we've gone 3 generations. So Laurie Strode is a grandmother. She has had kids who have now had kids. The 3rd generation does not believe that the events of that Halloween night actually occurred. It has become an urban legend. That's how long it's been. The middle
Really quick interjection. Just want to say I really like that touch. I just like that in movies in general, so I like this direction already.
Okay, cool. So yeah, the middle generation grew up hearing the oldest generation talk about that night, and it kind of became one of those things where you have that like cranky old grandma who tells her stories and whatnot, and you just kind of start to put it off. So the middle generation just wanted to forget. They're like, he's dead. He crawled off and died. You don't have to worry about the boogeyman. And then the youngest generation it's an urban legend. It never happened. And so we are following a group of high schoolers. And essentially, we meet this group. I just kind of am going to say that they're very stereotypical. It's not going to be where the band members are jocks. I'm not going to do that. It's just going to be very stereotypical, Oh,
Everyone
sorry.
knows the coolest kids in the band kids, right?
Exactly. And so the even though the stereotypes have changed, they've evolved since the 80s, kind of just because, in my opinion, that's like a good way to do it. We're gonna just kind of have the stereotypical group of kids with the jock, the cheerleader, the girl who's really smart. Like literally just if you've seen Scream, put that in your head. You're good to go. And so we follow these group of kids. We kind of set up that it's an urban legend, and then we start to see that someone is stalking. We start to see. I wanted to kind of mimic the shots from that first movie, where we don't necessarily see Michael, but we can tell that somebody is watching this group of kids. And so eventually, it is revealed that somebody who is in a mechanic's outfit with the legendary Michael Myers mask is killing people. The old people think Michael Myers has returned from the dead. the middle generation is like, oh my God, it's a copycat. They're trying to capitalize on this town's trauma. And the youngest generation is eating it up. And I kind of wanted to play on, in my personal opinion, I feel like a lot of the people of our generation have become so normalized to like the gruesomeness of what we see in the media that I'm not trying to minimize if a serial killer was actually to come to town, but I do think that maybe it would be an interesting idea to explore if the high schoolers like weren't freaked out that they were about to die, if that makes sense. And so that's like, once again, I'm kind of highlighting the separation of the generations. And if you're wondering, how do they have a Michael Myers mask? Well, you're going to find out. So essentially, okay, I talked about the disconnect. Okay, so we're going to eventually have this Michael Myers, quote unquote. He's going to finally get up the nerve to start attacking people. However, he's really, really bad at it. So we're going to have this scene where Myers is stalking. It's like super classic. It's a couple who's inside. They're, like getting ready to watch a movie. They're making popcorn. We kind of follow him around the house. And then Myers goes in for the kill. And he just was not expecting it. So the husband and the wife gang up on Michael. They get the upper hand. In the process of the fight, they actually murder him. And so what we end up finding out is it was a copycat, of course. It was a copycat Myers. It was somebody who was just trying to capitalize on the urban legend. And of course, once again, like the middle generation is like, oh my God, this is so terrible. They were just trying to rile everybody up. But the younger generation is like, oh, this is so cool. Think about how many clicks they got for blah, blah, blah. Like, once again, I'm trying to like highlight the differences between the generations. And so we now get to Halloween night. And this is where I said, if you're wondering how they got a Myers mask, here's how. So remember how I said it was an urban legend? Similar to how in Scream, they actually have a Ghostface festival to like celebrate the massacre. The Haddonfield does the same thing in a way. They don't try to do it. The sheriff and his deputies are constantly running around trying to stop the kids from doing it. But essentially, they go out for Halloween and everyone's wearing Myers masks. Everybody all the kids saw this Michael Myers copycat go viral and they wanted to capitalize. So everybody bought Myers masks. So imagine just walking out to Haddonfield streets and seeing a sea of Myers. So as the copycat is dead, and essentially what is going to unfold is on Halloween night, amongst these groups of high school kids, it's going to be almost like a Scream style whodunit. They're going to be going around to different houses. Some are going to get separated. People are going to get murdered. And it turns out that there is a real Myers amongst this sea of all the other Michaels. And they're trying to figure out who did it. And as it starts getting down and like whittling down those high school kids, when it comes down to the final person or the final couple people, sorry, I accidentally skipped a sentence.
You're good.
Okay. So they're starting to whittle it down, and the final couple people are doing that thing where they like go to investigate because they're trying to like figure out how to stop it. They're trying to figure out who is who, and what they end up realizing is they need to go and find the one person who actually survived Michael before. And so they figure out that Laurie Strode is still alive. She's in an old person's home. This is a very different Laurie from the way they set her up in the reboot trilogy. Not that she's necessarily not still like the great fighter that they kind of made her, but she kind of went through the trauma. She got through the trauma. She had a life. She had a daughter. She had a grandchild. These high schoolers are not related to her. It's not following her grandchild like in the new trilogy. they just go to the home because they need to talk to Lori to try and figure out, how did you beat Myers? Because now that all their friends are dying, they're starting to feel like this is the real Myers. Like, this person can't be stopped. It's happening all again. As they get there, it is revealed that there is a second Myers. So there's actually two Myerses that are here attacking the group of kids. Some more murders happen. It's down to that final girl, and there's two Myers. And so we get to the kids' final showdown, and essentially they talk to Lori. We kind of let her have her moment, and contrary to like the final girl that we've been setting up, she actually does get murdered. So all of the high school people that we have been following this entire time, they murder her, and now the two Myers have cornered Lori, and they're in the old or the retirement home. And they take off their masks, and it's revealed that they were two of the kids who were in the group, all Scream style, and they give their classic "we're villain" monologues, and they essentially talk about how they want to do a podcast or a YouTube channel. I didn't necessarily pick one, but essentially they saw how viral that Copycat went, and they wanted to capitalize on it because they want to become viral, they want to make money. And so they decided they were going to dress up as Myers. They were going to go on this murder spree on Halloween night and recreate the urban legend. And the way it would end is they would kill the woman who survived it all 40 years earlier. And I know what you're thinking. Well, they only ended up there because the high schoolers had to go and track her down. That was just me putting them there. They totally would have gone there whether the high schoolers were alive or not. So it was going to happen. It was bound to happen. It just happened this way. They're like, we're still going to go with the plan. Okay. So here's where it gets crazy. The Myers people, while they have been in the retirement home, like when they were chasing down the high schoolers, they were gutting orderlies, they were gutting doctors, they were gutting nurses. Other elderly have been murdered. So like we have this final shot where the two Myers are standing in front of Lori. There's just dead bodies everywhere. Like, I want this to be like a big final act. They give their monologue, and then they're about to kill Lori, who's basically on oxygen. She cannot defend herself. And at that very moment, the real Myers shows up. So he has been old. He has been decrepit. He has just been essentially living under a rock. I'm going to explain that in a second. But like right as they're about to stab Lori, I like envision his hand like grabbing the other person's hand, and then we have like this final fight with the real Myers, who you will be able to tell is him because he's going to have this old torn up mask. His mechanic's outfit's not going to work properly. Like, all the stuff is very clearly, you are an old man. He's going to be wrinkly, all that jazz. And he is essentially like, it's going to be this final fight. He's going to murder both of them. I envision it very, very cool. And then when that fight is done, the classic, whether action or horror trope, they're going to get the upper hand because he's old and decrepit, but then at the last moment, he's going to gain his strength. He's going to overpower them. Maybe they'll say something about like, "Oh, you're old, man. We're the new generation," like continuing with the themes throughout the movie. And then he's going to murder them. And then he stands up. He acknowledges Lori. She acknowledges him. And then he leaves. And I'm going to read this verbatim. I purposely want this to be ambiguous, but the real Myers only appears when they threaten Lori. And I want this to kind of solidify the bond that these two have, both in the universe and also in our society / our hearts. And this is going to be completely ambiguous. The audience can decide they want this to be as they want it to be. But I purposefully want it to be that there is this like secret bond. Maybe it's that Myers respected Lori for being able to escape. Maybe it's that they got some bond on that day it happened. however the audience wants it to be, it's going to be super ambiguous. But they acknowledge each other, and Myers only came out of his little hidey hole because he knew that Lori was in trouble, and then he came to save her. So that's how the movie ends, and then there's going to be a pan over shot, and this can either be a post credit scene or it can be at the end of the movie. I kind of like that you did a post credit scene, but I'm not going to change it, so we'll just say it could be a post credit scene. The ending is going to show on the TV that more copycats have popped up in other cities, and they're doing the same murders. And what they didn't tell us in the whole killer monologue is that their followers were super into the idea and they decided to do a whole mass murder thing together. So in all of these cities across the US, there are people dressed as Michael Myers going on Halloween murder sprees, and it's this insane death toll. And I just kind of wanted that to be like the end of the themes going throughout with doing the different generations, doing social media in our society. And I just thought it'd be really cool to have a shot of this news reporter showing the different cities and how Myers has murdered this many people here and this many people here, and like it started this almost cult following based off this urban legend. And that's the movie.
All right. It almost sounds like in like the best way possible. It's like Scream 4, but for Halloween.
Yeah, I can
Um,
definitely I can get behind that.
yeah, I mean, like I had said before, I really appreciate one of the things I really like in movies, especially like this and like horror, is the whole like, urban legend thing of, we don't believe that that was real, and we're like naysayers and we're skeptics that that happened, and then obviously that comes to bite them in the butt. I just really like appreciate that angle, especially with something like Michael Myers, who I feel like he's so steeped in just like lore and mystique, like even within the movies themselves. So I think he lends himself to like a reputation like that. Um, and I really like how you made it so like the whole town is kind of traumatized, of that old generation was kind of traumatized, not just Lori.
Yeah. Uh
Because I feel like I always feel like in the 2018 one, I get that Lori is particularly traumatized, but like everyone else is just kind of like, move on, whatever, blah 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 blah. But I don't know. I always thought like, I mean, there were other people that were killed too, other people that were affected too.
that's
So I kind of like that idea of like the whole town sort of being traumatized.
you know how people will talk about that when you make a Batman movie, you need to feel like Gotham is a character. I really
Mhm.
wanted to make it to where Haddonfield felt like a character, because exactly what you said. Most of the movies that we've gotten have been very focused on Laurie, and like you said, I wanted this to be focused on the trauma of the town and how the town has evolved over time and how the town dealt with its trauma.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely like that. This feels almost like the better Halloween ends. Um, like I feel like some of the hardcore fanboys would be all riled up about this because it's not just Michael all the time, but I think that's like a very interesting way to sort of like it's like a soft reboot essentially
Yeah.
of the franchise. But I feel like it touches on like a lot of similar themes too that you were going for about like the infectiousness of evil
Hmm.
that Myers has. And I really thought that like the ending especially is like it's almost like reminiscent of Halloween 3 with like him watching the
Yeah, with the
TV
masks.
broadcast. Exactly. Yeah. That was a nice little touch. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Yep, I was trying to add in as when I thought about it, I was trying to figure out how I wanted it to happen, and I ended up going with a TV broadcast as a nod to Halloween 3. Because I wasn't
Yeah,
sure if I was going to have them do like a delayed podcast or YouTube upload or whatever, but I went with the TV podcast because I wanted to make that nod.
for sure. Um yeah, and I really do like the exploration of Lori and Michael having this like weird bond because I know that's like you said, it's like heavily touched on and teased like in the different movies, but it's never really quite fleshed out. And I think you just leave it perfectly where it's like ambiguous enough. Um, I kind of what I did really like about the 2018 Halloween was how they sort of toyed with that idea that there was nothing special about Laurie. Like Laurie just convinced herself that like Michael was going after her, when
Mhm.
really she just happened to be in Michael's path as he does what he does. And
Mhm.
there was like nothing special about her. So they sort of like Last Jedi'd it. But but yeah, it's just such an interesting thing with like just the I think the word I used before was fits best, like the Michael Myers, like the allure of him is just like he's just so mysterious. So it's like, do they have some sort of link? Do they not? You'll never know. And I think you capitalize that on that very well.
Well, thank you. It's definitely. I know you can make an argument for some others, but I personally think that Laurie and Michael have to be the biggest and most well-known final girl killer combo. I feel like the only one you can put up there is Sydney and Ghostface. I know a lot of people want to say Nancy and Freddy, but I don't think that they have the rapport in as many movies, and the connection isn't driven as far home as it is with the other two pairings. And then I also, while Scream is very very popular and it's a wonderful franchise, I can't help but feel like Michael and like Halloween in general is more ingrained in not only horror but just the common society in general. So I think I would feel comfortable saying that Laurie and Michael is like the biggest pairing. But I can understand the argument for Sydney and Ghostface, or if you wanted to make another one. But yeah. So like you said,
I
really
definitely
try
think
we were
Laurie
driving
and
that point
Michael.
home.
Yeah, I definitely think Laurie and Michael have the most iconic relationship there. And I don't even think it's like close. At least with like Nancy and Freddie, it's like everyone remembers Freddie, hardly anyone remembers Nancy. And with like
Yeah.
Sydney and Ghostface, that's just tough because it's like obviously it's not the same Ghostface, so she's not really having that same relationship develop with them over time.
Yeah, I was watching a video about this recently, which is why it was on the top of my head. I think you have, like you said, I think you have to say Laurie and Mike pretty easily. But I was listening to these people who were very heavily trying to argue Sydney and Ghostface, so I just wanted to. And then I also feel like when I read lists, people put Nancy and Freddie much higher than I would. But yeah.
And just sort of just to touch on that, since we touched on the Rob Zombie one, and then this one had a lot of 2018 feels. I'm a big fan of Halloween 2018. It actually is my second favorite Halloween movie, which I know is like heresy to a lot of diehard Halloween fans. But I think confidently, I think Halloween might actually be my favorite horror franchise, which is funny because I only watched through all of them just last Halloween. So I had seen several of them before, but this last Halloween was when I watched all of them, and I just think, yeah, I think it became my favorite horror franchise, at least like iconic slasher franchise. And I really like the 2018 one. I don't like Kills or Ends. Their Ends is absolute garbage, but Kills was all right. But I genuinely think 2018 Halloween is where it's at.
Yeah, no, we can definitely have the trilogy discussion. So when I first saw 2018, I won't lie, I hated it. I just did not like it. But then when Kills was about to come out, I rewatched 2018 and I liked it a lot more when I rewatched it. Um, I don't, I wouldn't put it second personally, but I did like it better. I do think it's the best of the trilogy. Um, Halloween Kills is very interesting to me because I think the story is absolute dog doo doo. However, I love that they evolve Michael into this gigantic killing machine. And I know he has done kills for many moons before. Like all the movies, he gets a lot of kills. But generally speaking, when people compare the classic slashers, Jason is the one who brute force just murders people. Like he obliterates, he bludgeons. Michael generally murders with more of a finesse. And so my favorite part of the trilogy just happens to be Halloween Kills because they decide, what if Michael Myers was just John Wick? And while the story is
Pretty
dog
much.
doo doo, I
There is no
love the
story. What do you mean?
kills. I I wish that I could just get like a quick cut version of just Myers killing everybody and have that be the movie, and then I'd love kills. But I did not like the story at all. Um, Honestly, I think, and we were kind of talking about this the other day with how there's this a common idea that in slashers you don't have to make good characters because they're just gonna die. But I disagree. I do think a lot of the best slashers actually have a good enough story and at least a well-made main character because you're following them through the entire movie. And I just don't like the characters. Also, Judy Greer was my least favorite character in that entire thing. And when she gets murdered at the end of Halloween Kills, spoiler alert, I cheered. I jumped for joy in the theater.
Yeah, I didn't care for Madison at all. I thought she was very weak. Protagonist there. I really just what I really appreciated the most about 2018 was I like where they put Lori. I like that she became this sort of like survivalist, paranoid, um, eccentric to say the least, or just crazy, obsessed with defeating evil and killing Michael because she believes that they have this like inseparable bond and she's like destined to do it. I don't know. I just thought that was um, a very interesting direction to take her character, and I thought that they did it well in that one.
The funniest part is that they did so well with it that it spawned let's bring back every character as an old beat 'em up in all of the requels. So I just think
Right.
that's funny. Um,
Exactly.
and I don't know why you're calling it Halloween Ends. It's Corey kills people. I don't know what you're talking
Right.
about.
Corey Cunningham, the movie. There
Yeah.
actually is apparently a supercut that does Halloween 2018 and then like 20 to 30 minutes of kills and then like the last fight, the final fight of 20 of ends. And it's like a 3-hour movie, but it's like I feel like I want to watch that cut because I feel like that could make most sense.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. If you find it, send it to me. I feel like I would watch that. And I haven't watched N since theaters. I probably won't watch it unless someone's like, "Hey, you want to watch this with me?" And it's, there's nothing else to watch. But what I remember was I actually really enjoyed the character study of Corey, and I really liked that part. The part I didn't like was it's a Halloween movie, and Michael and Lori really just take a complete back seat throughout the entire thing. So if they had just made Corey Cunningham the movie not inside of the Halloween mythos, I actually think I would have really liked it. But the part I didn't like was that they put this story that, like I said, to me I actually thought was pretty good of showing his character study. And then they kind of say, well, let's also just put Myers there for like 2 seconds.
None of it makes any sense. And it's just disrespectful to the lore.
Yeah, the whole thing
I
is
mean,
just
he literally calls him an old man and pushes him down and takes his mask, and he does it successfully. Like,
yeah,
no, this dude's gonna wreck you.
it's definitely, and like you said, the band kids are all of a sudden the bullies. Like I don't.
I feel like David Gordon Green just got bullied by band kids.
Didn't you say they hadn't written this script and they wrote it like 2 seconds before filming or something crazy?
It changed a lot, and they're just lying. David Gordon Green is like, "Oh, we planned to do this from the beginning." No, you didn't. That's a lie.
When
Because
they originally. Oh, sorry, you can go.
they originally planned it as a duology. It was going to be just Halloween 2018 and what became Kills. And then when Halloween 2018 did so well, they're like, oh, let's make it a trilogy. And they're like, oh, it's all going to be just one night. Like the whole movie is going to be just the whole night spread out over 3 movies. And then COVID happened. And then they just had to sit on it for a while and they had time to think. And then they just started getting into these weird ideas of like, huh, what if blah, 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 blah. What if blah. And then they did like a bunch of rewriting and then they made ends. So it
Yeah,
definitely changed. The plan changed so much, and it got rewritten and reshot a lot. Maybe not reshot, but it got rewritten a lot.
it's just so upsetting because they do that whole character study of Corey, and if I'm not mistaken, they don't start having murders until like the last 20 to 30 minutes of the movie when Corey like ascends to become Myers. I know he does that thing where for like 2 seconds they're killing each other together. Like, remember then they go to that person's house and they're kind of killing him together, and you're like, oh, are there going to be two Myers? And then like in the very next scene, nah, he thinks he's old. Like it just was so they. I don't know. I feel like they just couldn't pick a direction.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah, I do like the ultimate ending though of like how the town finally gets rid of him.
Yeah, and I think I was so pissed off at the movie that I didn't get to enjoy that as much as I probably should have, cuz I remember just being so like, what the heck did I just watch? I just wasted my money, and I was just like, please end. So I don't actually know if I don't want to. That ending was probably good, but I hated it at the time because I was so pissed off at the entire movie.
Probably gonna rewatch this reboot trilogy this Halloween season just to see because it'll be my first time rewatching Ends and it'll be like my second time rewatching Kills. So we'll see. Maybe I'll like watch them all three like in one sitting and just see if that maybe makes it a little better because I have heard that.
Yeah, that maybe I'll give it a shot. Who knows? May You know what? There we go. We'll
Okay,
watch it again and then we'll watch it again and then we'll revisit this topic.
there you go. Okay, so real quick, one of the things I wanted to mention, discuss is as of today, as of filming today, the end of September, it was announced that Miramax, the company that owns the rights to Michael Myers, is now looking for a new studio to continue with the Halloween franchise, to buy the rights to make new products. Previously, obviously, Blumhouse and Universal Blumhouse had bought the rights to make these three movies, and then their contract's now over because they made those three movies. So now Miramax is looking for other studios that are interested. And there were a couple sort of rumor mill potential ideas for stuff that I wanted to sort of pick your brain on and have a quick discussion on whether we'd like these to happen or not.
All right, hit me.
So one of the things I saw on Twitter, take it with a grain of salt because it's sort of like a Twitter film rumor. But Malik, I believe it's Malik Akkad, is he
Malik.
the son of? Is he
Yeah,
the
he's the
son or
son.
grandson? Okay, so he apparently his idea is he wants whatever picks it up, probably a streaming service if we're being realistic. Um, he wants a like mini series or a full on TV series set in the universe of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Now, whatever that entails, be my best guess, but could be the immediate aftermath, could be the effects of that years later, could be, someone trying to do it again, like a legacy sequel to that. What are your general thoughts on revisiting that for like a series?
Wait, restate that first sentence. You kind of cut out for me.
Uh, Akkad's pitch was a mini series or a full season of a TV series set in the universe of Halloween 3.
Okay, okay.
He
So that was
didn't
the part I
explain
missed.
like right. Yeah, he just didn't say if it would be like right afterwards or like a legacy sequel 40 years later or like what, but just revisiting that property to redo for like a miniseries or something.
Yeah, so I personally, not that I don't love the Halloween franchise as a whole with Myers, for those who don't know, when Carpenter and Hill originally were doing this, it was supposed to be an anthology series, and the movies that did well would get sequels, which is why there was a Halloween and a Halloween 2. Halloween 2 takes place directly after the events of the first one, and it has an actual ending that was supposed to be the ending, and then they do Halloween 3, and it was supposed to continue on with the whole anthology idea. I actually think that would have been awesome. I also think, similar to how I just talked about with Halloween Ends, where if they had just done Corey outside of the Halloween mythos, that it probably would have been a good movie. Um, Same with Season of the Witch. If it didn't have Halloween 3 and it was just Season of the Witch, I feel like it would just be so much well received. Or so much more well received, excuse me. Um, the A lot of people consider it like a cult classic. Uh, it's not really like it's weird because it wasn't liked, now it's liked. I think it's a great movie. I do think that a lot of people go to watch it and they're expecting Myers, and then that's why they don't like it. So, I think the lore is great if they were to explore it more. I don't know if it would still be hindered by, like, if it was here's the Halloween TV show. Oh, and it's Season of the Witch. Like, I can't help but feel like fans will be as upset as they were back in the day when they were expecting Myers and didn't get Myers. So, love the idea of revisiting it. I love the lore of that movie, but I don't think it's a good idea to put it under the guise of Halloween because I feel like history will just repeat itself.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are pretty much identical. I really like Halloween 3. I find it very underrated and under talked about, but I completely agree. If you just called it Season of the Witch, it'd probably be like an 80s cult classic. I really appreciate that they sort of like, in a way, brought the fullness of Carpenter's vision of making it like a full anthology series. So it was a very creative direction to go. Um, but yeah, I guess for me, I feel like I don't really know what could be interesting to do in a series if you weren't completely remaking it. If you were doing like a legacy sequel, it's like, are they just like gonna do it again in the present? The mask thing again, I don't really know where you go from there. I feel like it doesn't really set itself up for like a future because like what it sets up to do, it already accomplishes in the end.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it implies that all the kids put the masks on and die, right?
Right. Like millions of kids were killed, which like I feel like that event, but that was like, and then he also like defeats the bad guys, but like he didn't defeat them in time. So like everyone died. So I don't know where you really go from there other than just some really sad drama about a world where like a whole generation was killed. I mean, I don't know.
But to be fair,
Yeah,
I don't know if it works great as like a horror, but like that would kind of be a cool premise for a show. Oh, like I guess people had to make new kids. That sounds terrible, but like you said, a whole generation is just missing. So that could be an interesting thing to explore if they did that, but I don't know if that lends itself well to horror. That'd be more of like a drama that I could see going on Netflix.
like there's ways you could go in that direction, but I'm talking like in like a horror Halloween direction. I don't really know where you'd go from there other than just like some other corporation does it again or something.
This time, instead of masks, it's VR, and the VR headsets are what's going to melt people. I don't know. They would modernize it somehow.
I like that for sure. One of the other ideas being thrown around, sort of, I guess, to capitalize on the Rob Zombie stuff, would be either in a series or series of movies, like a sort of prequel about Michael between the years 6 and 21, focusing on a young Loomis and his relationship in the hospital with Michael as he grows older.
So once again, I would say that could be really cool. I don't know if it personally lends itself well to horror. I think that could be very cool as like a psychological thriller, probably more towards drama. I'm sure they could raise some cool commentary. But once again, I don't know if that'd be good for horror. Though I do like that idea.
I think it sounds like a good idea, but like you said, it's hard to like make that a horror. Um, and also, I don't know how that would even work as like a series, because then like at that point, it just becomes like a medical drama. Like it's not like
Yeah,
you'd be focusing on Michael the whole time, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Just have Loomis having like one-way conversations trying to investigate Michael's psyche. Like I
here's
feel like you'd have to like incorporate like other patients, and then it just kind of loses focus, and then it's just about Loomis being a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, or whatever. So then at that point, it just kind of just becomes a medical drama.
here's what I want. It's not a TV show. It's a full movie. It's a prequel, and the entire movie is a 1 hour session of Loomis and his first ever interview with the 6 year old Michael. And kind of like you said, Michael's not going to talk. So it's whoever they cast as Loomis essentially driving himself insane from trying to talk to this little boy who is breaking everything he knows about psychology. I feel like that could actually be, and the entire thing plays out in real time. It's a full hour or whatever, how long the session is. I actually think that could be cool. I'd watch that.
No, that if there was a direction, that definitely sounds like the place to go. That does sound like it'd be really interesting. One of the other suggestions is just total reboot of the same premise. Like just do the whole Michael Myers, Smith's Grove breaks out, goes slashing. What Rob Zombie did, just total reboot, but just again, but 20 years later from where Rob Zombie was, just like in the 2020s.
So before I speak on this one, did you watch the Scream TV show?
Did first 2 seasons. I heard the third season was garbage.
Yeah, so I didn't watch the third season. Also heard it was garbage. That's why I didn't watch it. So with an IP like Scream, the TV show, in my opinion, worked really well. I liked both seasons. I was sad when it got canceled. I know it technically came back, like we just said, for the third season, but it was an all new cast with like a new setting and all that jazz. So with Myers, I don't think that works well at all. So I guess this is something that is yet to be seen because I know they're doing that Camp Crystal Lake TV show, and the goal is for it to go like 10 years and fully evolve Jason and blah blah blah. With these type of villains, I think they lend themselves better to, like we were talking about, bottle stories, not necessarily as little time as possible, but the way a movie tells a story versus the way a TV show tells a story. Like when I think we've had this conversation before, there's a lot of TV shows that should be like 4 to 6 episodes, really dive deep into a story, really flesh out characters, allow you to really get invested. To me, that's not Halloween. And so if they were just to rehash 78, I don't think it would work well as a TV show, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It didn't have to be a TV show. It could just be like another movie, you know?
Oh, that's right. You said it could be either or. Okay.
Yeah, just
I
like
mean,
a complete reboot of the same premise.
then no. I don't want that to be a movie either. I don't want them to just do like I don't know if we've had this discussion yet or not. I personally am pro horror movie reboots as long as they do something new. If they're just completely rehashing 1978, I'd rather just go watch 1978 in my humble opinion.
I agree, especially because like we talked about with the Rob Zombie one. I like that one, but my least favorite parts are the speed run through 78 in like 45 minutes.
I agree completely. The back half
'Cause
to
it's
me
like
is very forgettable.
right. I mean, because it's basically an actual like different, original, fresh prequel, and then it's like speed run through the plot of the original in 45 minutes. And so yeah, and so yeah, I would not personally like to see just a complete total reboot. Um, and the fourth and final option we'll discuss, just completely go back to the anthology idea. Maintain the Halloween title, maybe make it like a like Season of the Witch, but maybe without the three. Just make a whole series of films that are like Halloween colon some other title, and then just do anthologies by using the brand name like Carpenter originally intended.
So I have mixed emotions on this. One, uh, I never watched Freddy's Nightmares. I watched the Friday the 13th TV show. The Friday the 13th TV show has nothing to do with Jason Voorhees. It's basically an anthology where there's like this shop filled with all these trinkets that are haunted in some way, and then stories unfold, and it's like an anthology TV show. If I'm not mistaken, Freddy's Nightmares is relatively similar. Like, isn't each episode different?
It is. It's like Tales of what is it? Tales
Tales
of the
from the
Crypt
Crypt.
from the Crypt, where Freddy like introduces each of the episodes. But like, if I recall correctly, there's like one episode where Freddy is actually in it. But other than that, it's like unrelated. But Freddy does like an outros.
Okay, so if they did a Halloween TV show, in my opinion, it would just end up like those, which isn't a bad thing. As far as them doing movies, this is where the mixed bag kind of comes in, where I think I would sound like a hypocrite if I said I would be game for it because I just talked about how I didn't like that the other movies were just trying to sell more tickets by slapping Halloween on. Or just in general, like if somebody has an idea and then they just put on the name of an IP that they know will sell, even if the story itself would just be better as an original. So, but also I technically have no problem with that idea as far as an anthology if they just want it to be Halloween blank a tale of hat I don't know or like so yeah I feel like I have mixed emotions on that. I guess maybe it'd be better as a show because it always felt weird to me that Freddy did it and Jason did it, but Michael never did it. Just because those shows were extremely popular in the 80s, like those types of shows, Tales from the Crypt, and there was another one that was really big that I forget, but yeah.
I think I would be on board with this idea. As much as I love the character of Michael Myers, when you look at the whole filmography, I think I have enough in a good way. You know, I have a solid set of films that I can always go back to, even different kinds of films, different continuities, different Michaels. I feel like he's an IP that's obviously greatly respected, greatly revered, that I love, a lot of people love, but maybe just give him a rest, you know? Keep going with
It
the IP, the name, the brand name, but like maybe Michael Myers as a character, I think we're set. I think we have enough different iterations that we can all be happy and find something we like. So I think it'd be cool to explore something different.
I agree with you, at least this soon. Halloween Ends, if I'm not mistaken, was 2022. So we're still very close to that. Give it a decade. Then have Michael come back. Like, I don't think he's ever going to go away, but I think bringing him back this soon would be a bad move, in my personal opinion.
Agreed. So there you go. The future of Halloween. We will anxiously await to see what happens.
Yes. And if any studio execs were listening to our pitches, we would love to make our movies with you.
Of course.
All right. Thank y'all for listening.